Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, March 11th, 2024, and this is episode 878 of Living Free in Tennessee. And it is a Monday show, and I'm sitting here talking, thinking, I didn't double check my audio before we started. Oh, good, we're all good. I was like, better look at that. So today we're going to talk about a few things. But mostly, I wanted to share with you, now that it's sunny outside, some lessons learned after living 1 month with our solar system completely working all the way it needs to. And I'll explain a little bit about some of the barriers. Like, we've been using it since last April, but there's been some on and off again sort of things happening. I'll explain why that happened, and that's part of the lessons learned today. I'm also going to go through our usual segments. So we'll have Tales from the Prepper Pantry. We've got a good shopping report this week. We've got a frugality tip and a bunch of other stuff. The spotlight on a LFTN community member is going to happen on a different day, because I had feedback that the introduction segments were a bit long. And, it's funny because these segments come from, they used to be pretty much all the show was at the beginning with just a little thing. And we went once a week. And this was me sort of reporting on some basic categories from the homestead. And so it's just become our usual Monday segments. So that is why they exist. And a lot of people like to hear about the things that are going on around the Holler homestead. So I'm leaving them in, but I'm not going to add to them. I guess I'll put it that way. Before we get into that, though, I do want to talk about today's featured event. And this is not one you're going to be expecting unless you read the weekly mail. Did you read the weekly mail? It went out a little later than usual today, because guess who was chasing some sheep this morning? I totally was chasing sheep this morning. And that was kind of fun, but not what was intended, right? So the weekly mail went out, and it let you know about this event in advance. So if you're not on the weekly mail, you might want to get on that, because it will tell you things like this. But we have a very special webinar that we put together called Self-Reliance Voices, and it's learning from legends. And we're going to have some guest hosts running this, and then we're also going to replay some of the awesome sessions that have come out of former Self-Reliance Festival. So March 17th through 21, and it's free. So if you go to selfreliancefestival.com/webinar, you can just click this little sign me up button, and it'll take you to a form where we don't ask you for a lot of information, just your name, your email. And I'm curious where you heard about the webinar. If you leave that blank, it's not the end of the world. These are going to run 7 p.m. March 17 through 21. So that's 5 days back to back. You will have access to recordings if you can't make that specific time to see them. Those will be available all the way until Sunday. I believe it's March 23rd. And then they go back into the vault. And during this, there's going to be some fun giveaways and some other stuff. So you definitely want to check that out. Go to selfreliancefestival.com/webinar to get signed up for that. I also want to thank our two sponsors of today's show. The first one is John Pugliano of the Wealth Studying Podcast. And he puts out great episodes a few times a week that are just explaining how he's making investment decisions, but he also demystifies the process of using money to make money. And he shares it from the perspective of, he's a self-made millionaire. He made his first million in liquid cash before he even started working with money. And I think that's really cool. He takes the approach of a homesteader to investing that we take to our homestead. So check that out at investablewealth.com. Just go there and click on podcast, or use your podcatcher and you just type in the Wealth Studying Podcast, and you will be able to subscribe to that way. Our second sponsor is EMP Shield. EMPshield.com has a bunch of devices that protect your whole house, or whatever you hook them up to, from power surges, lightning strikes, that sort of thing. And it's the only device I've found that includes a $20,000 insurance policy, that if for some reason the device does not protect your stuff, they foot the bill for replacement costs up to $20,000. They even have a wall of fame in the factory of EMP shields that got nailed by lightning and people's house stuff didn't. So if you have a solar array or something else you think you might want to protect, uh, definitely check that out at empshield.com. And if you want $50 off, then you can totally get $50 off by using the coupon code LFTN. And I realized that I started the live stream and didn't go live on Instagram. Sorry, my Instagram people. You missed what the show is going to be about. And now we're just diving into live stream schedule for the week. Tomorrow, 12:30, I'll be on with Hand Hewn Farm. And they do some pretty badass heritage-based butchering, curing, all sorts of things. We're going to talk about meat, guys. And I'm going to be on with John Willis, 12:30 p.m. Central. Also, Wednesday, I have an interview with the Canny couple. So it's all about canning. We're having a big homestead, like make your food week. And then Thursday at 7 p.m., I've got the Self-Reliance Festival live stream. And then Friday at 9:30, of course, we have homestead happenings like we always do. So that's all over. Like, if you want to kind of keep up on this, we do put out on social media every Sunday just a little card that says what the schedule is. With that, it's time for our first official segment, Tales from the Prepper Pantry. This is where we talk about storing what you use and using what you store. I don't have a lot to say in this department other than we are still in the use it up time of the year. So on the homestead, the rhythm of the pantry is a little bit different than if you depend on the grocery store for your groceries, in that for part of the year, we're putting things into the pantry. And for the other part of the year, we're using things from the pantry. And it doesn't mean that all year long I don't put things in the pantry, because seasonally speaking, it makes a lot more sense to harvest and process large animals when it's cold outside for processing. If you do not have a giant air-conditioned refrigerated building for it, which I don't. And that's why people used to process pigs in the winter, for example, is, it was like, well, the meat stays cold and so it doesn't go bad and then you can still use it. And, meanwhile, on a 110-degree day, that's not ideal for processing any animals of any kind. I'll do poultry on a hot day, but man, that's because you can get them done fast and you can take them in your house if you need to. But yeah, those big animals, it's not like you're going to be dragging a cow through your house. So we do put meat up in the winter, plus it's hunting season. But a lot of what we grow here goes in starting in about a month. Like, I'm starting to get food fresh from the homestead. And what always starts early are early spring greens and those sorts of things. When I'm on it with my lettuce starts, then I get lettuce sooner than I have it. When I'm double on it and have my winter lettuce growing system up, lettuce never stopped. But this year I prioritized getting the house reconstructed over any of that sort of outside grow stuff. But at this point, we're 100% into, I can't ignore the planting schedule season. So like potatoes have to go into the ground by the end of this week. I usually put them in March 1st. They're already late. But then I saw the frost in the forecast, and this is how I make my decisions, right? I look at the frost in the forecast and I'm like, well, we probably can get away with it. And it actually went down 6 more degrees than they said it was going to. So I'm actually really glad I didn't put the potatoes in. But now there's no frost for the foreseeable future. As usual, the pear trees bloomed and then they got frozen. So no pears this year. And that, we'll watch that cycle as all my fruit trees bloom. What happens in Tennessee is waves of blooming happens. And a lot of times we get sort of this on again, off again spring in Tennessee, because we're kind of just geographically in this place where warm pushes up from the Gulf and then cold pushes down from the north. And in the in-between times, it's a violent swing of temperatures. I actually think this is why rosemary is so hard to grow here. Not that it's so cold, because I've grown rosemary in very cold places and it just goes dormant and then it comes back out. It's just like, oh, wake up, you nice little plant, and enjoy the spring heat. Boom! That's what happens to rosemary. Because it's like, I'll put my energy into my nice leaves and then they will be frozen. So anyway, it's something I kind of get amused by it. Like, I have all these fruit trees in my food forest and we'll see how it goes. I've planted some of them in places where microclimates are a little bit less cold. So maybe that will work in my favor. I think we even actually have, after planting, I don't know, 20-ish rosemary plants all over the property, 1 or 2 lived. One lived and then died because fire ants came and ate it. That like they like made their nest where it was this winter, so that took that one out. But we have a couple that are still alive, so we'll see. And then I have some plants that Ryan Steva like sourced from a dumpster that I can put in the ground that I've kept alive through the winter. It's also we've been eating lots of green beans because with all the busyness, I've been lacking motivation to make the effort to go outside and harvest the wild edible spring greens and make the salads and the other things I usually make with them. So like I made myself go do that once last week, which is weird because I actually like doing it, but the way that used to work in my just like my day-to-day rhythm was that I would go for a walk about 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock for about 45 minutes. And on the walk, I'd have a basket or a bag and some like shears or some scissors. And I'd go just put stuff in the bag and then I'd come home and then I'd cook dinner. Well, hi, practical gadgeteer. What I noticed is that with all of the production requirements for Self Reliance Festival right now, because it's 4 weeks away, almost 3 weeks away, we have a lot to do. And so I'm working well until after dark on things. I'm then cooking dinner and then jumping back to it. I'm up before the sun, and I realized last week that I wasn't getting outside and getting enough exercise. So now I've scheduled times where I just stop no matter what's happening and I go do that. But, I don't have that. I haven't made time for the extra hour to go forage. And that's something I'm going to pay attention to next year on that schedule, because this time of year is actually super fantastic for the early spring greens. And once things get a little bit older, they're not as tasty. And so when you're living from your pantry, if you're not buying stuff from the grocery store, which occasionally I buy stuff from the grocery store, I admit it, just because I'm craving something. Like what did I buy this week? I bought Brussels sprouts. I know some of you are like, meh, but I like them. So if you're not augmenting from the grocery store, and like think about a situation for like where for a year or two, if the grocery store wasn't really an option and you really had to live off of your stores, you start missing fresh vegetables because you're eating canned vegetables or frozen vegetables or dried vegetables at this time of year. And man, those early spring greens are like a spot of like happy freshness as soon as we get into it. And that's why this time of year is one of my favorite foraging times of year too, because it's there. But I've lacked the motivation to do that and I haven't made time for it. So we've eaten a lot of green beans as side dishes. I made a really cool dish this week where I took my canned green beans and I boiled them on the way out of the jar, which you're supposed to do with any of your low acid foods. And then I drained them. And meanwhile, I had been sauteing in my porcelain coated Dutch oven. I did it in that on purpose because I knew I was going to use tomatoes, which have acid in them. I sauteed up onions and jalapeno pepper that Tactical had that was fresh, and garlic, which I store, so I have that fresh. And when the beans were done and drained really well, I threw them in with some tomato sauce, a bunch of dried basil from my garden, and smoked paprika and salt and pepper. And it just sort of made like this almost Italian tart, but delicious garlicky green bean side dish that was a good way to use them. That wasn't just like what I usually do when I'm like, oh, I didn't think of a side dish. Is I heat up the green beans, I put butter in it, and I put like salt and other spices in it. And it's like, here's your buttery beans. And so like for the last 3 weeks, it's been like, here's your buttery beans. Here's some more buttery beans. Today's buttery beans are different because it's the butter that I got from Don Gorham. And then today's buttery greens are different because it's the butter I made. And I was like, okay, I'm in a green bean rut. It's like time to get myself out of the green bean rut. And that's where it's interesting, because your pantry, when you get into it giving you supplies or basic ingredients, you really can get into this I cook the exact same thing every time sort of rut. And so you have all these ingredients. You can make it more spicy than that. You know what I mean? So, but it takes like some effort. I also am out of breakfast meats, but I have a gajillion pork bellies that could be cured. So pulled them out of the freezer today. So I'll be making bacon all week. I thought I'd start it last week, but did not get them out of the freezer. They need to defrost, and then I will put them in a dry brine situation for 2 weeks. And then we will cold smoke them if it's still cold enough to cold smoke them. If it's not, we'll just have unsmoked bacon. And then I will get them very, very, very cold, but not quite all the way frozen, and run them through my commercial slicer. We're also serving this at the spring workshop. So I'm just looking forward to having breakfast meat again, because I keep like cooking breakfast lunch and it's like, well, I'll have eggs, but I don't have sausage or bacon to go with it. And we like to eat that a lot. So instead, we had roast beef and eggs and salmon and eggs. We've had all sorts of different things and eggs, usually loosely based on leftovers from the night before, which is not a terrible way to use up leftovers. But I know that I could go for a nice bacon day sometime this week. So that's not going to happen, though, for at least 2 weeks, because I guess I could pull one after 7 days. Like, curing bacon for 7 days is fine. You just get a little bit better cure when you let it go a little bit longer. But 7 to 10 days, we can make that work. I just want to make sure the stuff that we serve at the Living Free in Tennessee Spring Workshop is delicious. Next segment is weekly shopping. So that's all in the prepper pantry. I haven't had to buy anything. I'm out of vinegar, so it's time to get vinegar. I've actually been letting myself run all the way out of stuff on purpose, so that I can reset the pantry areas a little bit and do some deep cleaning in there. And it is like this time of year, you can source vinegar, like just normal white vinegar, 5%. I go through about 6 to 10 of those a year. So I'm just going to go get a whole year's worth in the next couple of weeks. And I may not actually get to it until after Self-Reliance Festival. But if I'm at Sam's Club anyway, then I'll grab them. That's usually where I grab them from, because they come in like these 2 packs and super easy to source. Oh, this is about the time of year when we're going to start hearing that thing where vinegar percentages have dropped and you might poison yourself. They make vinegar intended for making salad dressing that is less than 5%. And when you're canning, you use 5% vinegar. So you need to look at that. If you accidentally buy some, you can actually adjust the amount of vinegar you use in your pickling recipes to bring it up to the ratio that you need to have. So, and yes, I will be documenting the bacon making process as we're going along. I'll just put out shorts about it as I go, which I've done before. So there are several Making Bacon series on my YouTube channel already, because every year I make it, people are like, wow, how do I make bacon? And I'm like, it's so easy. It is so easy. It's so easy to do it well. I used to use a bacon calculator. Now I use Mike Leos's spreadsheet because I like his ratios really well. And the only time I ever had it fail, the bacon didn't fail, the pig failed. So we had a pig that had boar taint in it, and I can't stand that flavor. So every time I cut the bacon, I was like, nope. And we finally just threw it away. I was like, I can't even, like, it was disgusting. And I wasn't going to give like that kind of a preservative and salt bomb to my dogs in any volume, right? Because they would have eaten it, but I'm not sure that all of that salt at one time would have been good for them. Our next segment is the weekly shopping report from Joe. And Joe says the Dollar Tree, here's his update for the week. Dollar Tree drink coolers were partially empty, but they had plenty of drinks on the shelves, so they just weren't replacing them. One fridge in particular was full of Red Bulls for $2.50, and the food coolers were mostly full too. Aldi was crowded this week. Stock levels looked good, and we found everything we wanted. Staple prices were eggs $2.78, whole milk $2.86, heavy cream $5.19, OJ $3.29, butter $3.69, bacon $4.25, potatoes $3.99, sugar $3.09, flour $2.29, and 80% lean ground beef $4.59. And this is about 7 days old, so it was last weekend, like the one we just had, and that was the first weekend of the month. And EBT comes through, I believe, in time for that. So that may actually account for why it may have been busier at Aldi. Although I stopped in an Aldi yesterday and I got my Brussels sprouts and my mushrooms. And it was pretty busy for that Aldi since the last time I'd been there, but I hadn't been there in a while. But yeah, it was like every parking spot was full. And that could also be because Aldi's known for their prices being better than other grocery stores, and people are looking for any way they can to reduce their bills to just kind of stay afloat with all of the inflation we've been having. So I think it's reasonable that we will see more people at discount stores. Home Depot has a lot of bulbs, vines, and onion starts. The tool islands have lots of empty compartments. There's still specials going on for Milwaukee tools. And with just a few of the Ryobi USB charge tools left. So fire extinguisher area was full, and a 2x4x8 was $3.38 untainted regular. That's ethanol free for those playing along at home. $3.59.9, which is down 10 cents over last week. And there will be another. Yeah, so here's how Joe and I are. He's putting out the shopping report after I record my podcast on Monday. And so I'm a week behind him. If you want to keep up to date on the shopping report, like he'll have the one from this weekend, join our MeWe group. That's MeWe.com. Look for Living Free in Tennessee. And he puts it out there usually every Monday, sometimes Tuesday. It just depends on what's going on in his life. And then I take the most recent one. And every so often he gets me and gets one in before I go live. But usually I'm doing my show notes on Sundays, and he's still shopping on Sundays. So that's why that time lag of about a week. Next up, we have, wait a second. Yeah, next up we have a frugality tip from Margot without a T. Margot without a T. So this is what she has to say. Have you ever tried a new recipe and ended up getting a result that was less than what you were expecting? Well, don't throw it out. Do something else with it. This is where you tap into your creativity. She says this, I recently tried a new hummus recipe, and it turned out like a soup. So I made some pasta, poured the roasted red pepper chickpea sauce on it, added some tomatoes, a little Italian sauce, Italian dressing, and boom, I had some pretty darn good pasta salad. Maybe add some roasted chicken to it. That'd be good. The possibilities are endless. And now after writing this, I realize I could have just made a soup. It can be frustrating to make something that doesn't turn out like you want it to. But to me, it's more frustrating to throw good food away. Get creative. Who knows? You might accidentally make something you will make again one day. That totally happened to me I had all this butternut. What's it? It's a green one. Yeah. Okay. So it's probably a bisque made out of watercress that I've been known to serve at my spring workshop. And when there's leftovers from the workshop, they go in my freezer. And like I've been looking at that going, well, there's this giant bag of green bisque that I should use up. So I used it up. And the bisque itself is good, but like how much bisque are you gonna eat? So I ended up turning the bisque into a soup with chunks of meat in it, some cauliflower and some other stuff. And that turned into an even better soup than the bisque. That is back in the freezer in individual compartments for Tactical to eat because he liked it so well. So a lot of times you can sort of fail forward with your cooking stuff if it doesn't go well. It's very rare that things are not salvageable unless something like legitimately went bad. You just have to stop thinking about it like the thing you were trying to make and start thinking, okay, how can I make this taste good? So that's a pretty good frugality tip because you don't end up wasting food, right? Our next segment is Operation Independence. This is where I talk about building local ongoing revenue into my life. And one of the other things is to avoid the need to pay somebody to do work so that I don't have to earn as much money and pay taxes on the money, which means I have to earn even more money. And I still move things forward here. And here's what happens, guys. So like you move into a place, and sometimes when you buy a house, there are no appliances. Sometimes they're really old. And a lot of times what happens is you buy more than one appliance at the same time in that situation. So you'll come in and you'll be like, man, the fridge works, but I need a stove and dishwasher. Or the dishwasher works, but I need a stove and fridge. And you'll buy like all of the appliances. And then you're like, well, for $200 more, I can get, the dishwasher too. That $200 price, by the way, was real like a decade and a half ago. Now it's not so much. Now you're looking at $300 to $500 very often for a dishwasher. Sometimes 8 to 1,000. Like they've really gone up, which is a real bummer considering the quality of dishwasher that you get when you buy a dishwasher. You're wondering why I'm going off on appliances. Well, what happens when you buy all your appliances at one time is eventually they get to the end of their life because there is planned obsolescence in our appliances. They want them to break so that we have to replace them, right? And they will break often all in the same year. And so you'll feel like you're just getting a right punch and a left punch on your budget and a right punch because all your appliances suddenly start breaking. And that's that's where we're at in the holler. Like I had to replace my refrigerator, gosh, last last fall. And I'm not the new fridge, I'm not even sure I trust it or that it's going to last as long as the last fridge did. The other fridge, I just could not stop it from blurping water over in its defrost cycle no matter what I did. And so finally, after consulting with a lot of people, I retired it as an outdoor fridge where it can blurp water all over the concrete and I don't care, and put this new fridge in. Which brings up the fact that you need to maintain your fridges and look under them to see if it's blurping water, or you could end up with a very unfortunate floor rotting situation. Ask me how I know, right? So, um, my, my dishwasher broke. And it didn't break by like, I don't work anymore. Like it said, I don't work anymore. And then it worked again. And it said, I don't work anymore. And then it worked again. And we started diving into troubleshooting parts and had it narrowed down to two parts, tested, and then it started working again. And then it didn't work again. And where we've gotten now is that the control board in my dishwasher is messing up. And this is what happens when you get appliances that have computers inside them basically running them. Those things wear out and it costs hundreds of dollars. $224 to be precise was the best price I could find on the control board. And this is where it suddenly makes more sense to replace the item than to get the control board, put it in a relatively old machine where other parts are going to start breaking, and spend all of that time doing it. Because you need to have a balance between how much time you spend on something versus something else. But in the process of troubleshooting this, because I decided, like, usually when my dishwashers have broken, I've just tossed them and gotten something else. I decided it was worth the effort to troubleshoot to see what's wrong. And I learned a lot along the way. I found some pretty good resources for that, including a video that when the show is live on my website, you will see a link to this video on YouTube from an appliance repairman about what appliances to get: dishwasher, refrigerator, washing machine, dryer, and range, based on his experience in how much he has to repair them and ability to repair. And most of his suggestions don't have control boards like that. Okay, so that's a super cool resource. We've already tapped into that resource. Our latest freezer that we bought is one without that kind of a control board. So having more of the mechanical, like you can locate parts sort of thing. And as I've gone into this world, like you spend more for appliances that don't have that, but man, I think it's worth it. So at the same time, my oven also stopped working. So my kitchen staff for LFTN Spring Workshop is super happy with me because all my appliances are dying. And I did the same thing. I went through all the troubleshooting about why this is happening, and there are two things I can double check, but based on the symptoms, it's probably also the stupid control board in that oven. So the oven dishwasher were bought at the same time, and the oven dishwasher have gone out, probably control board in both, within 2 weeks of each other. Now, in the oven, the control board is also it's about $150. It's actually less than the dishwasher control board, interestingly enough. And I have to decide if I want to replace that because I actually can make this for $150 plus some time. It's not that hard to switch out. It's actually harder to switch out in the dishwasher than in the oven. I can get that done and probably get a decent amount of life out of this oven because it's also a gas oven, so it doesn't have a bunch of other electrical things that are going out. So I'm on the fence about that right now. I'm gonna actually spend an hour troubleshooting other oven igniting possible issues because it has a glow plug. It's not a glow plug, it's like a glow stick that lights it, and that works. And what's happening is something is keeping the gas from coming, which there's a safety override. There's a safety setup in the control board that's like, okay, it's okay to turn the gas on now. And it like heats up this other part that like that part could be it. We need to make sure there's not some other gremlin in there. And then if it is the control board, we'll make that decision. And I bring this up here because sometimes learning these things is really good for you. And fixing your appliances is really good for you. Like I had a dryer go out and I figured out how to change the gas element and it worked after that and I was like, "Sweet." And then I found another gas dryer for $100 that was brand new and I bought that and replaced it. But as you get into these things, you learn how to troubleshoot, which is good for your brain, and you can find ways to save a little bit. Like, because if it had been a door switch on my dishwasher, it would have been like 17 bucks. Sometimes it's a $20 part, guys. And it's not always the computer, but I will say I'm very disappointed in the quality of appliances in general. And I am looking at ways to do things differently here in that regard. And that in some cases means using commercial grade things that are less complex, less pretty looking. But if they'll last me 20 years, I'd sure be a lot happier. So that's part of the thing. So Mona says it's not electrical cause. So shortly after reworking, this is not on the solar system. So no, it's not. I think it's the age. They're about 5 years old, and that's about when I've had other control board issues. So I don't think it's because of the wiring in the house. But we'll be talking about the wiring in the house a little bit later. Okay. So, with that, it's time for the main topic of today's show, which is 3 lessons learned after 1 month of my solar system working all the way. And to avoid confusion on this, my house that I live in is not operating on solar. When we put the solar system in, I had to make a decision based on budget about what to do. And the Holler Homestead has a couple of things going on. I've got my house, I have the roasting shack. Those are on 2 different power services from the electric company. There down the hill from me is a guest cabin that's on the same power service as my house. And then below that is a workshop building where you could like do woodworking, and that's on the same service as my house and the workshop. And then there's a pump house that brings water to everything, and that's on the same power as my house. And gosh, back in 2017, Sean from Hack My Homestead came out here and we did a power and energy audit. And this was back when he was first developing this service for people. He was working full time, wrote me a report on how everything was, and we started prioritizing ways for me to be less reliant on the power grid and more resilient through problems that happen with the power grid, because that was my goal, was like reduce my use and become more resilient without spending 20s of thousands of dollars on something, because there's no reason from a budgetary standpoint when I'm already on grid power to then put in a $60,000 solar array. Like, it doesn't make sense from, money wise. Like, that's a lot of money I could be putting somewhere else on the homestead that would do so much more for me. But there are things on my homestead that use a lot of electricity. Like heating water with power uses a lot of electricity. Changing that to heating water with the sun was a no-brainer, right? Heating the house with power would use a lot of electricity. Heating the house with wood uses zero electricity. So there's lots of things you can just start chipping away. And we started looking at how, like what he calls vampire appliances, things that use power all the time just by being plugged in. And I started, like your microwave does that. I started rethinking some of the appliances I use, and changing some of my habits. Compared to him, I have very, very electrically messy habits. Like they're way better at making sure all the lights are off and not wasting the water and all of that at their house. But they are also 100% off grid, which means they have instant feedback if they've gone over the line, right? So when it came time to finally dive into solar, two things were in place for me to do this. And the first thing was that all over the last, decade, the cost of entry into a solar system has gone way down. Panels are down, batteries are better down, chargers are down. Like some of those things end up near the same price, but what they can do for that price is amazing. And that trend should continue so long as we are making, these efforts and there's a market for it. And then a piece of legislation was put out by your federal government that offered a tax credit for the clean energy bill is what it was. A tax credit of 30% for you know going using putting in a solar system, anything related to that, and any structures you had to build related to it. So like if you had to build something to hold the panels up, then that structure becomes part of the 30% tax credit. And I ended up not building a structure to put mine on, but there were some things I had to do related to it. So you do not get to use the write-off until your system is installed and you put together like all the parts, the labor, like I think it's labor too. I'd have to double check that, but so that brings down the cost of the solar system 30 more percent basically, because any taxes I was going to pay the government, I get those back when I file my tax return, and that brings down the cost further. And with that 30%, we went from it makes absolutely no sense to put in solar right now to, well, self, you have a goal of being more energy independent, self. And in the last 3 years, the power grid has gotten a lot more unstable. And we've had like power outages that last longer than an hour, and some of them have lasted days. And you have all these things in place to deal with that, but what if you could start making it so you care not when the power grid goes down because you have other things going on? And so I talked to Sean about it, and we were like, well, hey, we'll do a solar build at the spring workshop, which we did last year. And I bought all the stuff and we put the solar system in, and in the middle of my workshop, the power company said, hey, just to let you know, we're going to do a it's scheduled now, but it needs to be done now also, so we were not planning this until today. We need to do a maintenance that requires us to shut the power grid off overnight on our last night of the workshop. So it was going to go off at like 8 or 9 o'clock. I think it was 8 p.m. and then not come back on until the next morning. And I've got like 70 people here who use water and all of this, and my water runs on the power and blah, blah, blah. So I got this information Saturday, and I hit Sean up. I'm like, on the walkie-talkie, I'm like, hey, Sean, a challenge has been issued to you by our power company. Can we run karaoke off the solar system? Because that's what we're doing at that time of night on a Saturday at my workshop, or sitting around a fire, whatever. And he was like, certainly. So the test for the system was that the power went out, and we ended up running extension cords to run the lights up at my house on the outdoor event space. And I did end up doing generator karaoke because my generator was not liking the solar system too well. And it was sort of overloading it. So we just did generator karaoke, but the system worked. But the way we chose to size it was not intended to run anything on my house ever. It was intended for the guest cabin to run basic lights, an electric refrigerator, which we could be more frugal with power there and put in like a propane fridge if we wanted to. And I may address that in long term. Um, and the big power draw was that it was also going to run my pump house where the water comes from. So there's two pumps that run down there. So to get this done, we upgraded the pump house from 110 pumps to 220 pumps so that it would just pull less. And that took a while to get ready with an electrician doing wiring. Luckily, I had large gauge wire underground already going down there. And then we also had to do some changes to how things were wired in the cabin with an electrician, part of which involved separating the systems because the solar system does not feed back into the grid. Okay. So the first decision I made was like, this is all after power comes into my house usage. And that way I don't ever run the risk of shocking somebody. I don't have to have it inspected because I'm basically plugging this thing into the wall in essence. So that is not true probably for every location, but that's how the codes are here as far as inspection goes. Like they're not gonna basically I'm in essence plugging a battery into the grid and charging it from the grid, and I have a switch that either charges it from the grid or charges it from solar panels on my roof. And it's not capable of feeding back into the system. So when we went to size it, Sean was like, like, what's your budget? Blah, blah, blah. Do you want something that just like barely makes it through the night? Or are we going to do something bigger? So if you have multiple cloudy days, you'll be okay. And I said, well, let's start. I would like it scalable. Let's start with something basic that gets it through the night. And then on super cloudy days, we'll just charge from the grid. Or if there is no grid, I'll plug in a generator. And in this way, we'll get our water system going. And so we did that. And the reason I chose that is I was still looking at like 5Gs going into this thing. Yeah, I actually haven't filed my taxes yet from last year, so I'll know how many Gs I'm actually looking at, but it was around 5. I ended up paying an electrician to do quite a bit of work related to this, so that was not in the original bid, nor was it Sean's job to do that. So you're going to hear about some malfunctions going on that have nothing to do with the system that Sean put in, and they have everything to do with the individual who wired my house to begin with. So you'll find out more about that. So once we were done with the spring workshop, we knew the system worked. I had fulfilled everything I needed to do and for the tax write-off, and that was awesome. But what started happening was some system failures over time. So it would, Rachel, it would just like reset itself and we couldn't figure out why. And then Tactical noticed that the metal siding had a little bit of a charge. So it was discharging more than we thought it should be. And this gets us into the lessons learned. Installing solar into an existing home that's old with old wiring will teach you things about the wiring that you had no idea about. And so if you have a house that you're doing something like this to or a property, be prepared with budget and time to fix some things because we found bad wiring. We found scary bad wiring. We're really thankful we found bad wiring in the walls where we could not see the wire that just like terminated in the insulation with no caps that could have just sparked at any time. We found things like that and replaced all of it with the help of an electrician. And that means that that place didn't burn down. Like it may have never burned down the way it was, or it could have burned down. But now the chances of it burning down because of an electrical problem, because it's all been upgraded, is different. Now, just know you got to know your wiring, man. And if you don't know that you don't know what you don't know, and don't be salty when you realize that, well, crap, these plugs were put in wrong and now they have to be put in right. The other thing I found was that we had improper grounding on my guest cabin. We now have proper grounding on my guest cabin. So that made the system sensitive to what was going on, because the way it protects itself is if it senses any variations in the power that it's interacting with, it's like, nope, I'm out. So that's where the resets were coming from, right? So I found out about that. And then while we were there, we noticed with the electrician that some things were just not up to code. And I say this not in the like it's illegal to do this way, because it was totally grandfathered in. It's totally legal here. I mean safety codes. Like these codes, some of these codes exist for a reason. And when the electrician saw them, that's the question I would always have. It's like it's not up to code from the classes you just took, and it's the rules, or there's like a legitimate reason why I care. And so we fixed a lot of that. So my first lesson from installing solar is you're going to learn a lot about your wiring if you already have wiring in your house. And it's really helpful to have an electrician who's good at what they do, which is why I'm really thankful for Senior Chief Electric, which is who we worked with on this, who are out of Sparta, Tennessee. And he has more work than he can do, I'm pretty sure. But I'm going to throw it out there in case you're in the area, because Senior Chief Electric, he takes the kind of quality pride in his work that you want if you're trusting the electrical wiring in your house to not having a fire. He also won't shortcut stuff. So if you're looking for an electrician who will, he's not the guy for you. And he's only like, you find him on Facebook basically, or if you Google him, it'll probably bring up his number. But I've had his link in the show notes a few times. Second lesson is know your why. Don't be rosy-eyed about all of the electrical savings you're going to have. Choose wisely. Like, know why you're doing it. If you're doing it to save money on electricity, find out how much money that will be in advance based on the system you can afford, and look at your power bill. And if it's going to cut your power bill in half, multiply that out to figure out how many years based on your usage you can do. My power company, I can pull a whole month of data, a whole year of data on my usage. So I can like literally see how much power I used for the last 12 months in the online portal. And that was really helpful in planning. But we also ran, in order to make this decision, we ran this thing on the breaker that looked like an octopus, like it was all plugged into the breakers that we were going to move to the solar. And we did that for, I think, a month just to see how much power we used. And we did it at a time of year when we had relatively high power use. So when we sized the system, my primary why was to be more resilient, because the power is going out more now. And it was not to cut my power bill in half. And so like not having a 5 or 6 year payoff or 10-year payoff was fine with me. I was willing to invest some money in that. But if you put my $5,000 system into your house and took some of your stuff offline, my monthly savings is $5, $10 in that range. It's not a lot. And that takes a number of years to pay off. Now, in the summer, that number may be higher, but we have a lot of cloudy days here in the winter, right? So if you're expecting a dramatic difference on your power bill, know what you're talking about first. Know what you're talking about first. So mine is sized based on budget for resilience. And I am so happy with what we've gotten out of it at this point. We also developed my system to be scalable, so I can add panels and batteries to it if I want to. I can make it bigger over time. And based on generation and based on power usage that we have here, we pull it down to 30%. If it starts at 100, it goes to about 30% overnight, which means it's doing what it needs with a cushion. That means if I go into a night without it at 100% and the power goes out, though, I'm in trouble. So I have taken to making sure it's topped off when like sunset starts happening. I can see that the panels are below baseline usage. And so then I'll just top it off to 100% at that point. If it's not at 100% or 95 is fine, And on a sunny day like today, that's not going to be a problem. It will Like yesterday, we had more power than we needed. I should have been doing all the laundry in the middle of the day, and I was not. So, um, yeah, that's sort of how that works. And then use reputable companies for equipment because like we did that. We ran into this issue with the grounding. They helped us troubleshoot all of that because it was kind of flipping on and off. And then they said, you know what? We actually like our newer model is less sensitive to that, and they gave us an upgrade for free. So we sent the one back, and the new one came in for free. And not every company will do that for you. And I believe that is from Signature Solar, but I'm not sure. Um, but it definitely was great to have that kind of customer service. And um, the reason I even was able to know who to use was that I worked with Sean from Hack My Homestead, and he has worked with different companies and figured out who he likes to work with. So my shortcut to that was that I was able um, to do that. So I've been asked what type of batteries are you using, and I should be able to answer this, and I cannot. Um, I I don't know if they're lithium iron phosphate. I know they're not flooded lead acid. So I had a choice when doing the system to go with less expensive batteries that would last less long, and I opted for batteries that lasted as long as they like the best that they could last because I was like, if we're going to do this, want to do it right. So we can drain our batteries to zero and we can abuse them, and they're designed to do that. I also got a battery that has a built-in heating system so that they will work below 32 degrees because where they are, I can usually keep it warm. But like when we were down to -5 degrees, I needed that. It was above freezing in there, but it was cold in the utility closet where they are. And yeah, figure it out together says probably lipo 4. I mean, if Sean was on right now, he would tell you exactly what it was. And I will tell you this, I will get that information by the Homestead Happenings. Like I can tell you the brands of everything. I totally should have put that in my show notes. I just didn't think that that kind of question would come up. So, knowing your goal and then assessing it based on your goal is really important. Reputable companies are so important. And I was able to source a pallet of solar panels, which was way more than I needed, and pass on those savings to people rather than buy them individually online because I only needed 10 panels, right? And there was like 36 on a pallet. And, I went and picked up the pallet. We got them, and I was able to come in while covering some time and gas. I was able to come in 20, $30 per panel below what you could get the brand new things online for. And then you had to pay shipping on those as well. So that was a great tip to do. So if you're doing a solar project, I mean, Sean does this all the time where he'll be like, I'm getting a pallet, who wants some, and he passes the savings on. You can be in that role too. Just know that you need to sell them if you're going to do that. And selling things takes time for sure. And then the third lesson, and this one sort of really solidified this week. Okay. Access to the real-time data helps you make wiser power decisions. And what I mean by that is I have an app on my phone where as long as I have connection to internet, and it's connected down there, I can be like, boop, what's going on? Oh, the panels are generating X amount. The battery is X full. The house and that system down there is using Y amount. And it shows me throughout the day whenever I look at it what's going on. And every so often when it gets below 20% in the batteries, it says, hello, power grid, top us off. And it doesn't take them, it puts them up about 30 or 40%. So it's programmed to top them not all the way off, but just to get them a little higher. And that is set up so that I optimize my solar input rather than and use less power. I might actually change that because remember, my primary goal is resilience, and having them closer to 100% is better. So I may actually bring up the when it kicks in number. I haven't decided yet because at nighttime I actually If I know it's going to be sunny AF the next day, I don't mind if it gets down to 20% or something and then charges from the sun during the day. And when the panels are charging over like enough to be fast charging the battery, it won't pull from the grid, even if it was supposed to trigger to pull from the grid. Okay. So this app, when I first looked at it, I was like, I don't know what I'm looking at here. And it was very confusing. And I just made a decision to look at it every day, a couple times a day, to see what was going on. And like you can see a graph of usage, and you can see this other icon based thing. I've showed it on a show before. And what happened over time is it started making sense. And I learned that baseline usage for the cabin and pump house is between 127 and 145 watts. So like if it's like, how much is it using right now? It's going to be between 127 and 145 watts that it's using. And then if a water pump kicks on, it goes up. Or if Tactical's refrigerator compressor kicks on, it goes on and I can see those. And over the month, I figured out what was refrigerator and what was water based on, well, I just did a load of laundry, and hey, darned if it didn't go up to like 1600 watts. Okay. So, as a result of that, I realized that the time of day that I use water for my goals actually matters. So if we go into the night and it's 100% charged and I do a whole bunch of laundry after dark and a whole bunch of dishes after dark, then and take, 5 showers, then it drains the battery faster because it's kicking on the water pump. Wherein if I do a lot of that stuff during midday, then I use less water at night, kick on the pump less, and it drains the battery less. And then I don't need to charge it from the grid because it'll come back, on a day like today that's beautiful. It'll come back and it'll top it off. I'm sure it's topped off right now. I haven't looked right before this because I'm doing the show. But at the same time, I built the system so I can do what I want. And if I decide I need to do all the laundry and dishes at night, which during the spring workshop, like the water usage after dark is a lot, then I will do that. But last week I was looking in the morning because I'm like, oh, the sun came up and boom, the panels start working. Like that's been sort of a fun thing to watch happen. And I was like, why is the cabin using, 4 to 600 watts? Like that's higher. And I watched it throughout the day and it never dropped. It just kind of like it would go higher, it wouldn't go lower. And so then I said it like the next day it was still doing that. I was like, tactically, something that's funny is all of a sudden the cabin's using more power. It's fine if what you've done is like plug in heat mats for seedlings or whatever, but did you change something? And he was like, well, I'm using a heating pad at night on my low back. And I was like, well, that shouldn't be it. That's like 35 watts. And this is hundreds of watts, almost as if a pump is on. He's like, I'll be right back. And he goes down to the pump house. And here's what had happened. My spin down filters in the pump house were clogged. And because we've had so much rain, like the biggest issue I have with my water treatment is suspended clay. And so we have spin down filters to try to pre-filter some of that out before it goes into other filters, before it goes into it's like a whole thing that we have to do. And the spin down filters, you like clean them out when they get clogged and it's fine. They're between the spring and the holding tank. And so the pump from the spring uses less power than the one that gets it up to the house. And it was just on trying to refill because just a tiny trickle was getting through those filters. And so we knew pretty quickly that there was an issue there. Now, would it have been better had we noticed it sooner? Yes, but like you can check those things once a week and then you get a bunch of rain like we did and they were just clogged. So what would have happened in the past is that they would have been clogged and eventually it was not refilling as much as the water I use out of the holding tank. And eventually I would find out because there would be no water in my house. And I'd go down there and be like, darned if that refill pump isn't just going all the time and there's no water coming through. And now I got to wait. Now I got to clean out the spin down filters. And now I got to wait 45 minutes while my cistern fills up again. Right. So in a way, this has given me a troubleshooting tool for, hey, if we're suddenly using baseline 400 watts, then I've got an issue, right? Cloudy days now make me even and less happy than they used to. And I moved away from Oregon and was so stoked that I could get away from the gray Oregon rain. And then I moved to Tennessee where it rains a lot. So when we have more than about 3 days back to back of rain, I'm starting to get the Oregon sads, right? So I already don't like cloudy days. Now I really don't like them because I'm like, and I'm using power today because we're not regenerating because we're never getting it's like ah. So I'm maybe a little over dramatic about that. Um, Based on the generation from my panels, I'm pretty sure I need to have some of my taller trees trimmed to make the generation better. I'm thinking in particular about a um, a chestnut tree I have that when it leaves out is going to cause some serious shade, and I need to get that one trimmed back, and it needed to be trimmed anyway. And a couple of box elders. Now you need to balance this sort of thing with like, do I just want to have no trees on my property? No, I want to have trees. That means there will be some shade on the panels. When there's shade on the panels, you don't get as much generation. My panels are located where they are located because there was not another good place to put them where there wasn't shade. So we always knew that the shade would be there and we chose carefully. But I will probably invest some money in taking some of my super tall trees and cutting them back, like basically pollarding them so that we can get a little bit more sun on there while balancing that I like having shady spots on my property because it's cool. Frosty mornings, this tool, it's great. I can be like, wow, we're not generating very well, and there's sun on the panels, and I'll be like, oh, darned if there isn't frost on my car windshield. I bet there's frost on the panels. So put your panels where you can maintain them. A frosty morning will melt off when the sun hits it, but a snowy morning, you're going to have to bang the snow off, or you're not going to have the generation you need. And dust in the air accumulates on them, and you need to clean them from time to time. So if you can avoid putting them on your roof, avoid putting them on your roof. That being said, mine are on the roof because that was the only place I could see them. So those are my 3 lessons. We'll just sort of recap that. Know your why. Installing solar can make you learn things about your wiring you wished you hadn't known, but you're kind of glad you did. And hello, balloons. And 3 is access to that real-time data helps you have a better insight into your power usage and make better decisions. And so like some of the power savings is probably going to be not just because we bumped up the system, but because we're making better power decisions. And I think that's kind of a cool thing. So a bonus observation really is knowing the why and how it fits into my long-term energy resilience plan has helped me embrace this system as it is, learn more about solar, and and not have um, unrealistic expectations. And something that I've always heard people say who advise on solar is that it's more important to get your batteries in than your solar panels. But when we go into this like whole I want to have solar thing, we're like, oh, I need the panels. And so we like really obsess on the panels. Don't obsess on the panels. Buy the best battery you can get and charge controller and get those things set up and just charge off the grid if you have to. And then get panels if you need to do it in pieces. And you can always find used panels that are not ideal, but they'll work and then upgrade the panels later. Like there's lots of ways you can do this. If you can't eat the whole apple, eat half the apple. If you're going to eat half the apple, like I bought in and trusted that batteries were more important. But now that I see it in action, I'm like, man, batteries are like more important than anything else in the system. So that was just really brought home to me in a very visceral way by having my own system working. And the cool thing is right now there's that tax credit. So like if you're ready to do it, use it for sure. And with that, that's the end of the show. So thank you for joining me. If you like the show and want to support the work I'm doing here, you can do it in 2 ways. 1, get your coffee at hollow.roast.com. 2, sign up for that free webinar and check out what we're going to be doing with that. It's over at selfreliancefestival.com/webinar. Thanks, guys, so much for joining. Make it a great week.